Welcome back to Two Tickets, Please. I'm your host, Josiah Wampfler. On this episode, I'll be reviewing the newest and possibly last Hayao Miyazaki film, The Boy and the Heron, as well as director Yorgos Lanthimos' latest Frankenstein-inspired gothic comedy, Poor Things. Plus, I'll look at why Studio Ghibli's 1988 masterpiece, Grave of the Fireflies, made me think of what's going on in Gaza today. That's all ahead on this first episode of 2024. So let's start by digging into The Boy and the Heron. In 2013, the legendary Japanese animator Hayao Miyazaki released what was set to be his final film, The Wind Rises. Centering on Jiro Horikoshi, the designer of the Japanese Zero fighter plane during World War II, the film grapples with how capital and militarism corrupt artistic endeavors, a fitting final chapter for Miyazaki, who has always felt uncomfortable with the commercialization of his work. Capping off the film is an astute final line for a man about to drift into the quiet of retirement. "You must live, darling. You must live." But such a storied career certainly deserved an epilogue, and very soon it became clear that Miyazaki would be returning for at least one more film. That film has been titled The Boy and the Heron for the English release, but its original Japanese title seems to be a response to the final line of The Wind Rises. How do you live? Set in 1943 Japan at the height of World War II, the film follows 12-year-old Mahito as he processes the pain of losing his mother in a hospital bombing in Tokyo. His father, the owner of an airplane parts factory, much like Miyazaki's own father, has remarried, taking his late wife's sister, Natsuko, as his new wife, and she is now expecting a child. Helped by a gaggle of adorable old maids, the new family has moved into a countryside estate owned by Mahito's mother's family. They are not free from the chaos of the world in this seemingly quiet abode, though. A pesky, talking gray heron tortures Mahito with promises of seeing his mother again. The children at school offer cruelty to the new transfer student. Forces within a foreboding tower, supposedly built by Mahito's granduncle, threaten to break up the new family. And the estate itself, with its Western-style house split from a traditional Japanese residence, reflects the coming Japanese defeat and the painful period of Americanization that is to follow. All of this, in true Miyazaki fashion, is wrapped up in a Wizard of Oz-style journey to a fantastical new plane of existence that forces Mahito to face his grief and the film's central question: how do you live? I have to say, while I enter most of these reviews with a fairly clear idea of the main themes and ideas of the films I'm discussing, perhaps the most important thing I can admit about The Boy and the Heron is how much I don't fully understand. In many ways, I think that's intentional. Miyazaki's work has long been fantastical and strange, sometimes in ways that frustrate viewers looking for clear answers. But this may be his deepest and most personal work. With that, you get the feeling that there are parts of the film that are meant for Miyazaki and Miyazaki alone. And while certain themes are apparent, The Boy and the Heron is more about life's questions than its answers. A corollary question to how do you live is what shapes the life we choose to live. Miyazaki reportedly wrote the film for his grandson as a way to remember him, which is why it's helpful to view the film through the lens of an 83-year-old man looking back on the life he has lived and toward his family's future. Themes of legacy, destiny, and lineage all flow from this and feature heavily in the film. Mahito's life at the start of the film is being shaped for him, both by the loss he has suffered and the decisions of his father. When the gray heron rouses him from his complacency with the cruel promise of seeing his mother again, Mahito's response is telling. Miyazaki's complicated feelings about his father's profit off of war shine through, as Mahito's instinct is often toward violence, wielding a sword against the heron, building a bow and arrow, and even in a moment of deep despair, inflicting violence upon himself with a sharp rock to the side of his head. It all poses further questions. Is this violence an inextricable part of Mahito? how can we break away from the violent tendencies of our past? In the second half of the film, Mahito must finally enter the mysterious tower his granduncle built to gain closure on his mother's death and rescue Natsuko, his father's new wife. He is guided by the duplicitous Grey Heron, whose help often comes with a cost, a reflection of the business interests Miyazaki has had to contend with over the years in creating his films. But as Mahito navigates the strange world of vast seas, friendly pirates, cute little marshmallow balls named Wara Wara, and fascist giant parakeets, he starts to shape his own life actively, and at times, the world around him. It is in this fantasy world filled with dream logic that Miyazaki's tale is also at its most meta. The question of succession has long plagued Studio Ghibli, and in The Boy and the Heron, Mahito comes face to face with the question himself when his granduncle asks him to be his successor. Most of the studio's output over the years has come from its two legendary founders, Isao Takahata and Hayao Miyazaki. But with the death of Takahata and Miyazaki possibly drifting off into retirement, the world has asked who will lead Ghibli into the future. If Mahito's answer to his granduncle's plan of succession is any indication, it appears that Miyazaki has unburdened himself with the question entirely. For years it seemed Hayao's son, Goro, was being set up for the role. But his directorial career thus far has been complicated with misses like Earwig and the Witch. His father has said this newest film is for the grandson, but I think there is some truth to the notion that this is also a compassionate plea to his son to shape his own life as he wishes and let go of the expectations placed on him by the public. In response to his granduncle's offer, Mahito dares not succeed him in watching over this fantasy world and chooses instead to live in the real world. He fears that his malice, expressed throughout the film in his violent tendencies, would taint the dream world. And though his real life is full of chaos, he accepts his lack of control over it and chooses it anyways. The man who was once the most likely successor at Studio Ghibli was Yoshifumi Kondo. The right-hand man for both Miyazaki and Takahata on many of their films, and the director of 1995's Whisper of the Heart, Kondo suddenly died in 1998 of an aneurysm. Some have contended that his death is partially attributed to overwork, though there is disagreement on whether Kondo's stress came because of the specific working environment at Studio Ghibli or the broad realities of the Japanese animation business. Either way, Miyazaki took Kondo's death hard, and his first retirement announcement came shortly thereafter. The Boy and the Heron took the longest of any of Miyazaki's films to complete, and he ceded more control than he ever has on a film, focusing on storyboarding and letting animation director Takeshi Honda lead the animation process. The results are that this film has all the beauty of his past work, but the film also employs brilliant new techniques, such as the incredibly disorienting fire sequence at the beginning of the film. Like Mahito, Miyazaki has learned to accept his lack of control over the chaos, and attempted to avoid the malice in the process that may have led to his friend's death years ago. Of all the questions in The Boy and the Heron, though, the biggest revolve around grief, both personal and societal. The film's title comes from a book Mahito's mother left him called How Do You Live? It is like she is asking him from beyond the grave. It was also asked of Japanese society following the end of a war where they had suffered unimaginable loss. But implicit in that question is this: how can we love again after such loss? How can we possibly dream? Mahito's central mission in his quest through his granduncle's fantasy world is to save Natsuko, a woman he refers to as someone his father likes. He struggles to build a relationship with her as a maternal figure, and is concerned with the child she is bringing into this chaotic world. In his grief, the future has become clouded, and dreams have forsaken him. Grief is perhaps most starkly marked by the absence of focus on the future, an inability to dream. We become so wrapped up in thinking about what was that we can no longer think about what might be. Throughout The Boy and the Heron, Mahito begins to dream again. Though these dreams begin as ones corrupted with anger and malice, they soon become dreams of beauty and contentment amidst the chaos. Through his journey into a strange land far from home, Mahito finds acceptance in his heart for his new maternal figure and an incoming younger sibling. In a profoundly simple scene at the end that feels almost anticlimactic. As Mahito clears out his childhood room before his family heads back to Tokyo, Miyazaki poses a final set of questions to his audience. The space is now empty, the canvas now blank. How will you live? What dreams will you choose to fill it with? The Boy and the Heron may end up being Hayao Miyazaki's final film, and it has turned out to be one of his very best. With gorgeous animation, incredible voice casts, both Japanese and English, a transcendent score from longtime collaborator Joe Hisaishi that will hopefully earn him his first Oscar nomination, and a story that contains all the magic and whimsy we love from Miyazaki, as well as his very soul. The Boy and the Heron is a tremendous epilogue for a legendary career. I'm giving the film 4.5 out of 5 stars. It is currently out in theaters. It is fitting that director Yorgos Lanthimos' newest film, Poor Things, is sandwiched here between 2 animated films. His second outing with screenwriter Tony McNamara and star Emma Stone after 2018's The Favorite, Lanthimos has delivered a film just as meticulously constructed. The sets, the costumes, the lighting, and even the performances are all perfectly attuned to the director's vision, a level of control usually only afforded to animators. The mad world he presents, inspired by Frankenstein, or perhaps its sequel, is breathtaking to behold, and his troupe of actors play their parts admirably. It is all quite impressive, but maybe not the masterpiece it so clearly believes that it is. Emma Stone plays Bella Baxter, the Frankenstein's monster in this adaptation of Alistair Gray's novel Poor Things. Her Dr. Frankenstein is Willem Dafoe's Godwin Baxter, an imposing, secretive doctor with a sewn-together face and a sprawling mansion complete with a laboratory in the basement. Bella often refers to him just as God, one of many unsubtle aspects in this messed-up creation story/feminist awakening. Godwin enlists medical student Max McCandles, played by Rami Youssef, as his apprentice to observe the developing Bella and look after her. Soon enough, he learns why this grown woman appears to have the mind of a child. Godwin resurrected a pregnant woman who committed suicide, and he replaced her brain with her child's. As Bella develops mentally, her interest in the outside world grows, and noticing McCandles' obvious affection for her, Godwin arranges their marriage to keep them both under his control. When the foppish lawyer Duncan Wedderburn, played by Mark Ruffalo, looks over the ungodly restrictive marriage contract, he sneaks into Bella's room to find the woman these 2 men want to keep under lock and key. Bella runs off with Duncan, desiring to see the world and intrigued by his unbridled hedonism. Through a journey filled with badly behaved men, exotic locations, a truly incredible amount of sex, and strangers that expand her worldview, Bella learns what it means to be a woman. Or at least what a male screenwriter believes it means to be a woman. Emma Stone is the clear highlight here. I've long considered her one of our great working actors, especially when it comes to comedy, but her work here may be the best of her entire career. It isn't just her incredible physical work, impressively invoking the motor skills of a child, as well as the gradual progression to the relaxed gait of an adult, nor is it just her vocal performance, which also believably shows that progression from childlike babble to something approaching the language skills of a fully grown woman. No, the greatness of Stone's performance lies in her ability to do all of that, to deliver so many fabulously deadpan and slapstick comedic moments, and somehow find the time to give Bella a heart. She brings real human emotion to such a highly constructed, oddball character amid a bizarro world that, if lacking, would render the whole affair a beautiful, cold, useless exercise. The rest of the cast is also great. Dafoe's German accent is spot on, and he lends a level of gravitas to Godwin that makes his few comedic moments all the funnier. Youssef is delightful as McCandles, and Ruffalo is hilarious with his over-the-top accent that matches his outsized ego. Unfortunately, as impressive as Poor Things is technically, its own inflated ego shines through in its direction and its attempts at feminist themes. Its technical excess is most acutely felt in the first act. The dissonant plink-plunk score, dominated by out-of-tune harps, mallets, woodwinds, and occasional strings, is quite grating, especially when combined with cinematography that, though at times quite brilliant, features an ever-moving and swooping camera and the baffling overuse of fisheye lenses. These decisions, while interesting, ultimately sour the film from the get-go. I didn't feel properly oriented in the film until around the second act, and my issues with the score and cinematography would periodically come to the fore throughout the rest of the film. Simply put, visually and sonically, Poor Things is just doing too much. Regarding the film's discussion of female liberation, it is doing less than it has received credit for. Considering it's a film about a woman with a naive view of the world becoming aware of the patriarchal forces availed against her, Poor Things has been called the R-rated Barbie. The comparison is apt, but I would contend that if Barbie was Feminism 101, as some critics claimed, Poor Things is that basic class, but taught by men. It does have a clear picture of the patriarchy, wonderfully portraying men's desire for control of women's bodies and their patronizing view of women's intellect. Poor Thing, after all, has often been a dismissive phrase of pity levied toward women. Plus, the film has some interesting things to say about sex work and the strictures of monogamy within patriarchal society. But Lanthimos and McNamara's view of female liberation is almost entirely constructed around sex and women's relationship to men. As I've seen several female Letterboxd users point out, in a film full of gratuitous sex and female nudity, Lanthimos never shows menstrual blood. Similarly, we see nearly every inch of Bella's body throughout the film, and she remains utterly hairless, despite never shaving. Bella's body is that of a grown woman, yet the film refuses to deal with these two integral bodily issues adult women deal with, and the lack of their inclusion seems to point to the prevalent male perspective here. I don't want to be unfair, but it seems to represent the all-too-common view among men that periods and female body hair are gross. And for a film that lacks subtlety in nearly every other way, Poor Things only implicitly discusses the economic reality of marriage for women during this time period. Bella, from the beginning, is destined for marriage, but it doesn't really discuss why. Having just rewatched Little Women, directed by Barbie's Greta Gerwig, this quote seems quite relevant to that discussion.
Well, I'm not a poet. I'm just a woman. And as a woman, there's no way for me to make my own money. Not enough to earn a living or to support my family. And if I had my own money, which I don't, that money would belong to my husband the moment we got married. And if we had children, they would be his, not mine. They would be his property. So don't sit there and tell me that marriage isn't an economic proposition, because it is. It may not be for you, but it most certainly is for me.
Unfortunately, there is nothing near as profound concerning the economics of marriage in Poor Things. I have some other issues with the film's feminism, including its strange lack of care for discussion of race and the way it gives short shrift to Bella's queerness, but I'll save that for another day. All in all, Poor Things is a flawed but quite funny and impressively rendered film. Its feminism may not be all it's cracked up to be, but there is still plenty of worthwhile things it has to say. Plus, the performances, the sets, and the costumes alone are enough to recommend a theater visit. I'm giving Poor Things 3.5 out of 5 stars. It is currently out in theaters. Bombs raining down from the sky. The incessant buzz of warplanes overhead. Rubble where homes, schools, hospitals, and businesses once stood. Children crying out in pain and fear. People starving. Entire families now buried. Gaza 2023, Kobe, Japan, 1945. As we've seen the horrifying images of Israel's war on Gaza over the last couple of months, one film has continued to reverberate in my mind. Isao Takahata's Grave of the Fireflies. Released by Studio Ghibli in 1988, the film follows 2 children in the final months of World War II as they struggle to survive the American assault on the Japanese mainland. Unfortunately, as the opening minutes of the film reveal, the 14-year-old Seita and 4-year-old Setsuko perish shortly after the Japanese surrender after losing everything they once held dear. It's not bold to say that Grave of the Fireflies is magnificent. Roger Ebert called it one of the greatest war films ever made, and it's not hard to see why from the very beginning. As composer Michio Mamiya's hauntingly beautiful score rings out, the ghosts of Seita and Setsuko rise from the grass amidst a flurry of fireflies before they board a dark red train to the beyond. As with all Studio Ghibli productions, the animation is superb, with brilliantly detailed backgrounds and unique character designs that tell us much about the characters themselves, Seita's uniform indicating his nationalist feelings, and Setsuko's blue manpei invoking her innocence. In addition, the garment was commonly worn by lower-class women and girls and became a symbol of poverty. I could spend hours talking about every detail of Takahata's masterpiece, but I want to bring it back to what drew me to the film when thinking about Gaza, which leads me, of course, to the bombing scene at the beginning of the film. As the air raid sirens ring out, the children and their mother prepare to flee their home for the safety of a bomb shelter. The mother goes ahead, while Seita finishes burying their valuables in the backyard. As they leave the house, Setsuko on Seita's back, they look up and see incendiary bombs falling to the ground above them. In one of many brilliant moments in the film, the bombs clatter down around them, and Takahata has us sit in near silence with the children as they look around. The fire has not yet spread, as we see the remnants of a peaceful domestic life about to be upended. A bucket, a mop, a leaf gently floating in the water. Seita takes one last look and runs off, the fire finally exploding around them. The United States regularly bombed Japanese cities throughout World War II, but in the final year of the war, there was a purposeful shift away from precision bombing to firebombing large urban areas. Kobe, the city depicted here, was bombed several times throughout the year, killing more than 8,000 people in a city of just under 380,000. As of this recording, Israel has killed somewhere between 21,000 and 30,000 people in their bombing in Gaza, an area smaller than modern-day Kobe, with a population of 2.5 million. The terror Seita and Setsuko felt looking up in the sky and seeing death descending toward them is being felt by the people of Gaza today. Later, after the children make it through the fiery hellscape of their beloved city, Seita attempts to comfort his little sister, who is shaking in fear. It reminded me of the countless videos I've seen of Gaza's children, violently shaking from the trauma they have endured, comforting each other. And when the bombing finally stops, the children emerge from their hiding place to see their city reduced to rubble and ash, a sight all too common now for those in Gaza. Unfortunately, the children's mother was hit on her way to the bomb shelter, and Seita finds her in a makeshift clinic set up inside a school, horrifically burned and covered in bandages from head to toe. She dies shortly thereafter, though Seita conceals her death from Setsuko. Once again, Seita tries to distract Setsuko from the horror around them, swinging around on the playground equipment. Children comforting children amidst the brutality that has been foisted upon them. Each day, Israel's assault on Gaza is allowed to continue. More and more Seitas and Setsukos are created. The population of the Gaza Strip is about 50% children, a result of a brutal occupation and blockade, as well as periodic military aggressions, that has made it so few Gazans get to grow old. In this most recent aggression, around 75% of those killed have been women and children. The Geneva-based humanitarian group, Euromed Human Rights Monitor, estimates that at least 25,000 children in Gaza have become orphans because of Israel's current massacre. An acronym, WCNSF, has been coined in the enclave's struggling hospitals. Wounded child, no surviving family. What is frightening about the current situation is that the Grave of the Fireflies comparison is becoming more apt as the days go by. Because Seita and Setsuko don't die because of the bombing. They die of sickness and malnutrition. The spread of disease and lack of food are realities in Gaza now, as more than 1 million are without proper shelter and most struggle to find food. The United Nations has estimated that 90% of Gaza's population now face acute food insecurity, with most skipping meals. The World Food Program says that just under 580,000 are facing a catastrophic level of hunger, or in other words, famine. If Israel's assault does not stop soon, and massive amounts of aid are not allowed to enter, the death toll will rise exponentially. What must it be like to struggle to live through such barbarity? To have to care for children when bombs are falling and food is scarce? Grave of the Fireflies gives us a glimpse. Something that struck me was Seita's continuous focus on providing some level of normalcy for his little sister, distracting her from their situation with brief moments of joy. Whether that be taking her to the beach, giving her candy from his tin, or the wonder of fireflies. Seita wants nothing more than to hide Setsuko away from the madness of the world. Yet with all of these attempts at distraction, reality always rears its ugly head, most pointedly when the children awaken one morning to find the beautiful fireflies dead. As Setsuko buries the fireflies in a small mass grave, she reveals that she knows her mother is dead, despite Seita's attempts to hide the truth. His lie could only obscure reality for so long. Why do fireflies have to die so soon? She asks. Are parents in Gaza forced to comfort their children with similar lies? A 2021 New York Times essay by professor and writer Dr. Rafat El-Arir gives some insight into being a parent amidst such a massacre. He wrote, "These days, as we lie in the darkness at night, I fear the worst, and I fear the best. If we come out of this alive, how will my children's psyches fare in the years to come, living in constant dread of the next attack? On Tuesday, Lina asked, 'Can they destroy our building if the power is out?' I wanted to say, 'Yes, little Lina, Israel can destroy the beautiful Al Jawara building, or any of our buildings, even in the darkness. Each of our homes is full of tales and stories that must be told. Our homes annoy the Israeli war machine, mock it, haunt it, even in the darkness. It can't abide their existence, and with American tax dollars and international immunity, Israel presumably will go on destroying our buildings until there is nothing left. But I can't tell Lina any of this, so I lie. No, sweetie, they can't see us in the dark." Rafat El-Arir, a beloved teacher, writer, activist, poet, father, husband, friend, and voice of his community, was targeted by Israeli warplanes on December 6th and was killed along with his sister and her children. Like Seita, Setsuko, their mother, and thousands of other Japanese civilians, he was a victim of American bombs. The bombing of Kobe, Japan, was a war crime. The bombing of Gaza now is an ongoing war crime. I am sure that Rafat would have appreciated the beauty of Takahata's Fireflies. He and many other Gazans had strived to find beauty around them, despite Israel's violence. On May 11th, 2021, the day Israel launched yet another bombing campaign in Gaza, Rafat tweeted out a simple video of Gaza's fireflies. I'll leave you with that video, as well as his poem, To Palestine, to Gaza. And despite Israel's death sentences, like lead cast upon the head, gnawing at our life, clinging to it like a flea to a kitten, and stuffed in our throats the moment we say amen to the prayers of old women and men, blocking their ways to God, we dream and we pray, clinging to life even harder every time a dear one's life is forcibly rooted up. We live. We live. We do. That wraps up another episode of 2 Tickets Please. You can check out more of my written content at 2ticketsplease.substack.com. Thanks for watching.
you.